Hello again, and welcome back to the composition vlog. It's been about 3 weeks since I last filmed, and in that period I've mostly been working on quiet songs this time. Yeah, and making some, I think, good progress on that, which is very pleasing. I think the big news of the last 3 weeks is that the viola has been restrung! Yay! My friend Maya very kindly took an afternoon off and showed me how it was done, and it's made such a difference. I feel so much more confident playing it, because there's like a whole level of worry of, oh my god, what if the string breaks? What if it sort of detunes massively and I can't retrieve it? Because they're new strings, they do go out of tune quite quickly, so I'm having to get a lot of practice in actually sort of turning the pegs and tuning it that way, and just starting to become less afraid of it, to be honest, which is kind of a tragic thing to have to admit, but it is what it is. Yeah, so that's been a huge help. I haven't returned it to standard tuning though. I've kept the tuning that I had, which is F-E-A-G. So I found it really pleasing, and those pictures are working very well for Edward's new piece, Flower, that we performed for the first time in Manchester on Friday. Yeah, it works really well with the pictures in that piece, and I'm also really enjoying it for quiet songs, so I think that's what's going to stick. So, quiet songs progress. Yeah, so the thing that really came out at Snape was how hard it is to play and sing at the same time and do both convincingly. The comment from the guys, which I think I mentioned last time, was that the viola was very strong and that the voice was weak, and that this was more than just amplification. And so I've been sort of thinking about, God, how do I get around this? And the obvious solution is to have the viola pre-recorded so that I'm not hampered by it. And so I was thinking about video and started thinking about, okay, well, how am I going to do this? How am I going to approach this? And so thinking about the viola itself and that view that I get of the viola when I look down on it. And that's actually, you know, it's quite a different view than what people see from out there in the audience if you're playing it live on stage. So I ran a series of tests using quite close-up video of the viola. And recording it at the same time. So I'd originally intended to try to get hold of a DPA mic from the Bath Spa University Asset Store when I was down in Bath a couple of weeks back. However, they don't actually have a DPA. But the lady who answered my email was very helpful, and she suggested a contact mic could be a useful thing, and I hadn't even thought of that. But I've got one here along with a condenser mic, so I set those up, and while I was videoing I was also recording through a contact mic on the back of the viola and the condenser mic recording the room. So I've got kind of 3 directions of audio for this video, sort of, because the third one's out of the camera. And they give quite different perspectives, I feel. I think my favourite thing is actually mixing the contact mic and the room mic, because the contact mic has a lot more bass to it. And is very, very dry, but the room mic has sort of provides a lot more kind of the sound of the bow hair and the actual sort of string sounds that don't necessarily carry their sort of more subtle sounds. So I ran these tests, and yeah, the big problem I think is that I'm just wavering around too much, especially in the pig piece. It's very clear that the physicality of it all means that I'm just sort of doing this and yeah, going in and out of shot. I've got on my list of things to do to have another go at this while sitting down and see if that keeps things a little less seasick inducing, perhaps. But for the moment, I thought it was a good first test, and I really liked the material, but it also got me thinking that perhaps that close-up of the viola is a little bit lacking in context. It's, if I want to make a connection between me playing the viola on screen and me being on stage, doing whatever it is I'll be doing, I think it's very important that you actually see that it's me playing the viola. Otherwise it could be anybody playing a viola, and anywhere as well. If I'm recording in the studio, then I feel that it's useful to actually show that. And so I was thinking that it could be useful to mix up the very close-up viola footage, which I do like. I think visually it's very strong, with more distance shots of me actually playing it in the studio, and to sort of cut back and forth between these. And so I was thinking then too, to be able to cut back and forth between the contact mic and the room mic, and then it occurred to me that I can also put the contact mic on the window in the studio while I'm playing, and that'll pick up a completely different perspective again, because it'll pull in a lot more traffic noise from outside, plus filtering the viola sound through the glass. Once I'd made these recordings, and I thought, well, I'll just give that a go and do a rough improvisation just to see how that feels then to improvise just to that sound. While I think it's a fairly dire improvisation all over that one, it did confirm for me that it is a lot easier to focus on vocal production, and that the range of sounds is much more varied, and in general that the sound is just stronger when I'm not having to try to think about the viola as well. So I was having this idea of sort of cutting back and forth between different types of audio recording on the same or similar material, and I was sort of thinking about the structure of the piece, which originally, well, ever since the start, sort of had this idea of it being probably 3 or 4 separate songs, each of which deals with one mode of quietness. However, I began to recognise that I've completely failed to come up with any material for a third piece that I'm happy with. And while I feel that the drone material and I keep calling it the pig piece, there's no pigs left in it, but I think this material kind of goes together quite nicely. But I also feel that the pig piece material is, because it's so much more active, and I think the sounds in general are more interesting. I like the drone, I like the sort of scope of it, that it, nothing happens for a very long time, it just sort of carries on. And I think that can be strong on its own, but I think if I do that as one piece and then the pig piece as another piece, that the pig piece is likely to just completely overshadow it and sort of pull away what's special about it. And equally, that pig piece material is the hardest bit to sing over if I'm going to do it live. And also just sustaining it as a physical thing, because I'm not a great viola player. We can all face that, I think. And I'm still really learning how to play this instrument in the way I want to play it. And so I just feel that the pigs are going to be difficult to sustain, and they're going to need breaks anyway, just so that material doesn't get dull. So I'm starting to think it's going to be kind of a mash-up of these two sides of it, that some of it's going to be drone and some of it's going to be sort of frantic pigs, and and that from a vocal perspective, one will bleed into the other, and they may even, if I'm using video, they may even overlap. I think that could be a really nice thing to have overlapping video of two different styles going on. So there's been a lot of thinking about sort of going backwards and forwards and changes, and then I went to the Fila di Ballo exhibition at the Royal Academy, which really got me thinking about how sort of changes in material and how connections between material might be highlighted rather than smoothed over. I seem to have spent quite a lot of my composition career trying to make smooth transitions between stuff, and I'm wondering if I need to throw that out the window for this and really emphasize the differences and have that as almost additional material, that this change happens and then this change and this change, which I think will also go with these ideas of here and there and now and then that I'm playing around with in this piece. At any rate, so I did all this sort of filming and thinking and messing about, and then last week there was kind of a hiatus in actual progression on the piece. We had this gig in Manchester at Virtually Reality on Friday, so leading up to that I had to spend a couple of days making a costume, and then we had 3 days of rehearsal in London. But I took along what I had on the Thursday to rehearsal, just to test it out to the guys, because I've got, I think, about 3 weeks now when I'm just at home working, before we go to Denmark, and then straight after Denmark we've got a whole week in Snape where I really want to have this piece basically solid by the time I get there, so that all I'm doing is tweaking and sort of taking things up a notch, because I'm finding I'm just not working terribly well if I go in with a vague idea and then try to sort of make it happen while I'm in the room. I seem to need vast swathes of time to actually think about stuff before I do anything. So I'm trying to get that happening. So I thought, well, if I take it along and I just show them what I've got, then I can get that feedback and start processing that. So I ran through the stuff, and what we did was we projected the pig piece video up on the wall, and I just did a vocal improvisation in front of that. Which was very helpful, actually. It did cement for me the idea that I don't think that close-up viola all the way through is the answer. I think it needs some change. I think I'm going to need to be presented as separate from it. So the idea I keep coming back to in this is that it's in some way about separation. It's about temporal and spatial separation of performance from the studio. Also, I think about my relationship with the viola versus my relationship with the voice. Because, you know, voice, obviously part of your viola is a separate tool that has these sort of two parts to it. And I think I'm going to sort of push that further in this and sort of think about how that can work. I'm really very conscious that I don't want to just do a repeat of Edge in front of some viola. The material I'm liking from that improvisation are the held pitches and the sounds where I am explicitly copying the viola sound and trying to find a way to create a vocal version of those sounds. I think that's working quite well. So I'm probably going to keep working with that, and obviously more video, and try and work out exactly how to put that together. The response from the guys was not that positive for the video. I feel it can be convincing. I feel it can be a strong part of a live performance, but they're not convinced yet. So that's my task. If I'm going to use it, then I need to find a way to convince them, which is, yeah, a challenge. Yeah, there were suggestions that I should chuck the video and just write for the band. I'm resistant to this. There was a suggestion that I get someone else to play the viola, also resistant to that. So I really need to think about why it is that I feel it's important that this is kind of all me. It's sort of a slightly odd position, I think, for me to take. It's sort of something new that I feel it should be me, to the extent that I'm even having doubts whether this is a piece that I feel anyone else could perform. Yeah, so there's loads to think about, and I've got these 3 weeks now to work on this, and I also need to do some work on the Britain variations, because like I mentioned last time, Amy would quite like to record it in July. So I think that's everything. Thanks very much for watching. As always, if you've got any comments or questions, please leave them below, and I'll see you again next time. Thanks, bye.